phone we are showcasing in this review has attracted a lot of attention worldwide, especially among users who appreciate affordable phones with features that can easily stand side by side with the best and most expensive phones of today, at least when it comes to hardware specifications. We are of course talking about the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro. This phone is part of Xiaomi's new and very successful Redmi line, which has so far sold over 100 million units. At the same time, it is the successor of the Note 7 family, which has seen some huge success in the past. It comes with almost unreal specifications for a phone that costs about 270 euros. At that price, the phone comes with an exclusive 64 megapixel camera, a large battery of 4500 mAh, Gorilla Glass 5, and 6 GB of RAM. Sounds great, doesn't it? The only controversy, at least as far as Xiaomi fans are concerned, is that MediaTek 8-core chipset is being used for the first time in the lineup, at least up until recently, which promises a very high level of performance, but many doubt it because MediaTek chipsets are traditionally almost entirely focused on the low and the low-middle performance class. That being said, let's see what can Redmi Note 8 Pro do. Starting with the packaging, other than the phone itself, we find a USB-C cable with an 18-watt charger, so the phone supports fast charging and no compromises were made in this regard, which is great given the huge battery capacity. The phone design is quite decent, and we would characterize it as a quite nice looking phone, but given how it uses an already established design that Xiaomi has used on their other 2019 phones, we wouldn't say that it stands out. The bezels are noticeable, though they are neither large nor smaller than the other models offered on average in this class. At the top of the screen there's a teardrop notch. On both front and the back we find a Corning Gorilla Glass 5, located between the plastic frame. The screen is very good for this class, not the best but definitely far from the worst we've seen. The phone comes with a 6.53-inch screen and a resolution of 2340 by 1080 pixels. The IPS screen doesn't have a very high brightness, but otherwise has a very decent specs. The screen aspect ratio is 19.5:9 and the display density is 395 pixels per inch. Combined with number of options for adjusting your screen through software, it's certainly more than enough for a comfortable use. In terms of audio quality, we have to say that the sound is quite modest. The phone comes with only one speaker that was nothing special in terms of quality, positioned on the bottom of the phone. Now, it is also worth mentioning that the phone comes equipped with a 3.5mm connector as well as an FM radio. Next up is the hardware, which is one of the more enigmatic parts of this phone. When fans around the world heard that Note 8 Pro was going to use the MediaTek chipset, they began to question this decision, given how Xiaomi got us used to the fast Snapdragon chipsets. Additionally, Xiaomi is recognized as someone who provides the best hardware for the money invested. That is why many thought that a major shift in the company's philosophy and approach was going to happen, but we are glad to announce that these accusations are false. The Note 8 Pro uses an 8-core MediaTek Helio G90T chipset. It has two Cortex-A76 cores clocked at 2.05 GHz and 6 Cortex-A55 cores at 2 GHz, while the graphics are processed by Mali G76 MP4 GPU. The performance is outstanding, and we must say that we really got more than we expected. The Helio G90T is roughly side by side with the Kirin 980 chipset, and let's not forget that we're talking about a high-end solution. Sure, it's a bit slower here, a bit faster there, but all in all, quite fast enough to give a lot on all occasions. Some users were afraid of potential overheating, but we're pleased to say that it didn't happen. Of course, the phone will heat up after a long time playing, especially on the upper side of the device, but even this is at a lower level than recorded with some of the high-end chipsets that may even emit more heat, which shows that the liquid cool technology is obviously doing a good job. Liquid cool technology is a cooling system that Xiaomi promises to cool 4 to 6 degrees better than the conventional cooling. Maybe the chipset itself is cool enough, but to know for sure we would have to try a standard cooled phone with this chipset. Judging from my experience, we don't think that this is just a marketing stunt. There is also an option for additional GPU acceleration in case it's needed, similar to the GPU turbo function on Huawei and Honor phones. As for the rest of the hardware, Redmi Note 8 Pro comes with 6GB of RAM and 64GB of storage. A 128GB variant is also available, costing about 20 euros more, and we would strongly recommend that you take that phone, especially since it comes in white color that looks more elegant to us than the darker gray variant we got here. The dual SIM is a hybrid type, which means that you can insert either a SIM card or a microSD memory card in one slot. Xiaomi uses the Android 9 Pie operating system, along with the MIUI 10 user interface we've seen before. Our impressions of it stayed the same, or maybe even got worse as the time goes on. Not everyone will like the interface, but the fact is that it comes with a huge variety of options and interesting tools. We would say it takes some time getting used to it, but we say that for every Xiaomi phone we tested. And if you're already a fan of these phones, then it will pose no problem to you. An interesting novelty is the dark mode, which is a trending feature in the Android world. Also, the phone has a good old infrared port, which you can use to turn it into a remote control. Security options include a fingerprint scanner that works fine and is located at the back of the phone. A 4500 mAh battery is quite enough for 2 days of normal use. If you're more of a demanding user, especially if you're playing games on your device, the Note 8 Pro will not last as long, but the battery life is still quite sufficient for normal use. Charging is fast thanks to the 18-watt charger. In our standard battery test, the phone did pretty well, and after 10 hours of YouTube video and screen brightness at 50%, we are left with exactly half of the battery's capacity, which is rather impressive. Next up are the cameras, which have attracted a lot of attention globally. First of all, it comes with a new 64 megapixel sensor, which is very impressive and is designed for high-end phones. The biggest surprise was that it actually debuts on such an affordable phone. It is a sensor manufactured by Samsung, but there seems to be a deeper story around it, as we came across information that in fact Samsung and Xiaomi have jointly developed this camera sensor for mobile phones, so it debuted first on the fairly affordable Xiaomi phone. The other thing that caused a lot of reaction is Google Camera, or rather the support for it. We specifically think of the Gcam software, which on the Note 8's predecessor, the Note 7, has proven to be a much better solution for taking photos. It turns out that only Google algorithms and software completely unlock the potential of their sensor, at least when it comes to Xiaomi. It was initially announced that the Gcam does not support the Note 8 Pro, and many were disappointed with it. Moreover, information and comparisons have emerged where old Note 7 performs better than the Note 8 in the realm of photography, regardless of the sensors and the rest, just because Note 7 had a regular Gcam support. We have a good and a bad news. Definitely the Gcam for Note 8 Pro is under development and can be downloaded from the Cygen forum. The bad news is that the application is definitely in early stages of development for now. It does not shoot well, the resolution is limited to 1920 x 1440, it often crashes, and a lot of options are either missing or not working. We believe that the problems will be resolved in the future, but currently things are as they are. Now that we've explained the whole story, let's see how the phone fares with video recording. Basically, a lot of it depends on what you expect from the hyped 64 megapixel sensor. If you're expecting some miraculous quality, you will be disappointed. On the other hand, if you're expecting a fair and decent shot, that's exactly what you're gonna get. Shooting is possible in various modes, including 4:1 pixel binning that effectively produces 16 megapixel photography, which is the default shooting mode. It is possible to shoot in 64 megapixel mode, but to be honest, just like we see some advantages of shooting in 48 megapixels versus 12 megapixel, 4:1 pixel binning photography, the same applies here. Things are even a bit more drastic here, as 64 megapixel photos will eat your internal storage with tens of megabytes each. The large 64 megapixel sensor with 0.8 micrometer pixel has an aperture of f1.9 as well as a phase detection autofocus. The main camera system has 3 other sensors. One of the 8 megapixel sensors is an ultra-wide camera, and it captures wide shots, though there is a clear disparity between the huge resolution sensor and such a small sensor, which also needs to show a wider frame so the pictures captured have noticeably less details. Also, it doesn't use any special technology or photo assistance. There are also 2 more 2 megapixel sensors. One of them is used to measure depth, while the other is a macro camera, similar to what we saw on Honor 20 Pro phone, though we must point out that the results were noticeably more modest on this phone, at least from our experience. So, since the rest of the cameras do not offer anything special, it is clearly up to the main sensor to handle all of the high hopes we have in terms of photography. To be honest, whether it's because of the software or something else, only the photos in decent light seem to show a huge number of details, but nowhere near noticeable or even significant improvement over what we've already seen from Xiaomi. We can say that a well-known 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 sensor is a matching competitor in this price range. It was particularly interesting fact that photos taken during daylight with very good lighting are very good, while the quality rapidly declines with ever slightly less light. The sharpness of the photo is pronounced, while the color on them seems somewhat unrealistic. Depending on whether or not AI is used, some colors can be very emphasized, most noticeably green. Objects are especially pronounced in 64 megapixel mode for clearly understandable reasons, since light like this can provide extremely detailed shots. When it comes to night shooting, the results we have achieved were a bit disappointing. Maybe not so much because of the usability of the photos themselves, but rather because of this phone we didn't see any real benefit from the night mode option. Huawei may have spoiled us with its overexposed photos, but others have also offered very useful nighttime modes, not only in the high-end categories like Samsung. For instance, Motorola has done it on its mid-range phone, which is a clear Note 8 Pro competition device. In terms of portrait photos, we have to praise Xiaomi. The blurring level may be a bit aggressive, but we really liked it, especially because of the good algorithm that separates what's in the foreground from the background. A 20 megapixel selfie camera with an aperture of f2.0 is very good. Finally, there is video recording. The phone supports 4K video recording, but also 1080p at 60 FPS. The colors are a bit oversaturated, but the video quality is decent. There is definitely pronounced lack of stabilization in 4K, but for some basic recording needs, the Redmi Note 8 Pro is quite fine. Redmi Note 8 Pro is certainly not a phone without flaws, but hey, even the best ones have them. It is equally safe to say that it represents an outstanding value for our money. The phone boasts a very high level of performance and is a very nicely rounded product, and even though there are various small details here and there that distort the picture of a perfect phone, they're fine for a phone at this price. Maybe the camera sounded too bombastic and the announcements were too good to be true, but there's no denying that with a great battery, great screen, very good build, and let's be realistic, a solid camera for this category, Redmi Note 8 Pro is one of the most desirable devices in its class. It is quite certain that anyone who is considering buying a $300 phone should absolutely shortlist it, since it is among the devices that would compete for the next mainstream champion. This is why we decided to give Note 8 Pro our value for money reward. Thank you for watching another Bench House review. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also leave a like and a comment below. See you next time.